Greetings. With this video, I'm wanting to share some thoughts that I have regarding the need to get the breakthrough energy topic into greater circulation in our world. I think it's so important that we do that. We know that there are groups who are attempting to control human activities via control of the food and agricultural sectors and the energy and transportation sectors. Yet it seems not to occur to most people that the presentation of humanity's options to reduce fossil fuels consumption and to improve life via improvements to the energy and the transportation sectors is a very stage-managed, partial story, and that the true story is very different. But the reality is that the true story is very different. And I've been studying these things for more than 10 years. Folks, we cannot get to the world we want. We cannot get from here to there with the energy alternative options that are being placed on the table at this time, being discussed and being funded at very high levels in terms of getting the ball rolling by our federal and state governments and counterparts internationally. This is a dead-end street for humanity, and I want to tell you why in my view. The decisions so often in our world are made in a sort of siloed versus holistic manner. The problem of human poverty is acute on the planet. Here in the United States, the gap between haves and have-nots has been increasing in a very worrying manner since the 1950s and 1960s. Our middle class is being hollowed out. The true unemployment statistics and economic statistics are being falsified on a routine basis. True unemployment, as measured by any reasonable measure, and underemployment are multiples of what they're being reported, but more than double. We're on a road toward a return to Charles Dickens' England, not only in the United States but internationally on the present course. It's a very worrying scenario. Why is it that the alternatives and recommendations that are being put forward by our governments, by the big energy sector, by the Exxon Mobils and the BP that are sponsoring all these ads on YouTube, that are paying for all the ads on television, trying to convince us they're doing their best job at reinventing, our government saying the same things and so forth? Why would they be putting forward the solutions that they're wanting to, that they are, as opposed to the breakthrough energy technology solutions and secretized awareness and knowledge and technologies and black shelf technologies? Well, the answer should be fairly obvious to us. It is to maintain their grip on power. It is to maintain their status quo structures, their privileges, their revenue streams. Centralized maintenance of centralized control of the global energy sector. This is the goal on the part of the big oil firms, joined at the hip to the CIA's control groups in this area, to our federal government, who depends on a lot of taxes from this. You know, about $1 a gallon for the fuel we buy at the gas pump, gasoline, goes to state and federal taxes, mostly federal. State and federal taxes and so forth. They're dependent on this. It's like a junkie. It's like a heroin addict or something. They get attached to something, institutions in our world, the corporate sector as a whole, government institutions, major institutions in general, and it becomes the reason why humanity can't improve. And not only that, we the people can't even know the truth, because they realize that disclosing the truth would immediately cause we the people, you know, the global peasantry, to go, hey, wait a minute. You know, I got something that I'd like even more than an FCEV. I want the one where, you know, that technology that we paid for, we the people, the taxpayers, that Lockheed Martin or SAIC or Northrop Grumman developed in the black budget sector, Skunk Works, that's the thing that I could take my Tesla Roadster type car, pull out one or two of the batteries, put in that miraculous box, and then I wouldn't even need to plug it into the wall again. We could take trips down to Tierra del Fuego and it wouldn't cost anything. It's going to be an electric motor vehicle. It's not going to require any maintenance at all. Now we don't have to plug it in anymore. We don't have limited range. We don't have expensive batteries. I want one of those. Okay. the groups that are suppressing that type of technology under the Section 181 portfolio of the 1951 Invention Secrecy Act, and that is occurring, realize that as soon as they disclose that to we the people in a manner consistent with the founding principles of our nation, with the Constitution, with the Bill of Rights, with the idea of a government of, by, and for the people that is transparent, that is accountable, that is honest, that is not a secret government, and so forth, that we the people are going to go, hey, wait! I want my representative to make in DC to make sure we get that now. So me and the family and our meetup group and so forth are on the bus right now up there, and we're going to be camping out on the White House steps and so forth. And we're going to be making sure that our editor of our major newspaper covers these stories, and we're going to be writing into CNN and calling them and so forth. They realized that this would be a done deal. Or if it were disclosed that, you know, the Stan Meyer technology, the Paul Pantone type technology, half a dozen other inventors we have documented that have had advanced electrolysis technologies, in some cases super advanced electrolysis, that would allow us to run internal combustion engines strictly from water. If that were disclosed, this is also within the area of secrecy maintained both by the major energy firms and collaboration with our federal government and so forth, that we the people would say, hey, wait a minute, I want that even more than my plug-in new environmentally friendly EV that only gets, you know, 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 miles of range before I got to find another plug-in station. And all the electricity is coming through the grid power network. And you know, we'd really like to get rid of the grids because they're a fire hazard in our area globally and an eyesore. And then that is the centralized power energy structure that was put in place by that other lovable old Victorian era robber baron known as J.P. Morgan. These are not, I'm not fictionalizing here, this is the history. And that power, and both those two, J.D. Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan, were involved in shutting down Nikola Tesla's plans to bring free energy to humanity for all applications, residential, commercial, and transportation. This is verifiable history. There's lots of books and documentaries written about this topic. You just need to look into it to verify it for yourself. That goes back 100 years. And the grid power, you know, that's going to be involved in plugging in your little EV and recharging and all that and so forth, comes into our homes through these stupid new smart meters that are spying devices that are doing all kinds of funky things with the radiation electromagnetic spectrum, that are talking to smart appliances now being sold in all of our big box stores, refrigerators, computers, you know, microwave ovens, you name it, and they can actually turn these devices off. The state of California is already beginning to sell information coming through the smart grids. All the smart grids connect into the internet by password role hierarchies. We have no idea where this information goes or what is really being done with that technology in our homes. We know that the smart meter agenda is going to go into micro billing, time of use billing, and the bills, I think, predictably will become so complicated people won't be able to even contest them. You know, slicing and dicing, you know, milliseconds of usage, seconds of usage, minutes of usage at this time of the day, and so on and so forth. And all of this is being sold to the global public. Well, you know, realize energy is scarce. You know, energy, we have to be prepared to spend more because God bless their hearts, you know, ExxonMobil and BP and these others have been doing their best to come out with alternative energy technologies along with our federal government, of course, Department of Energy and so forth. They just haven't been able to make better progress with hot fusion and stuff like that. They're not telling the story that we're documenting in our Breakthrough Energy, New Energy, Global Volunteers, a network of good-hearted people, more and more books coming out every year, more and more documentaries, more and more nonprofit projects and websites, documenting conclusively, beyond doubt, with multiple levels of courtroom-grade evidence, 50 and 100 and 150 and more cases of this type, where the inconvenient truths about the alternatives that have been there all along since the day of Nikola Tesla, never entering into Fox News, CNN reporting, the Department of Energy and the other reports coming out of the high levels from our White House and so forth, where we the people, the global peasantry in effect, in terms of the our disenfranchisement from political power and political processes are being told, well, just understand, we all have to pay more and we all have to control our usage, and we have global warming going on and greenhouse gases and so forth, but the photovoltaics are getting better. We need to move the needle from the endemic line on the part of major powers in our world on these topics to neutrality, to where the men in black factor, the disinformation factors, the intimidation factors for inventors and small firms and so forth reduces to a neutral point where we can have reasonable protection for incubation networks that we're funding on our own dime out of the grassroots community in the world, and we realize it has to get going in Brazil or in Russia or in Ecuador or in India, in a place where the government will protect this new energy or breakthrough energy sector, whereas we know it will be suppressed and subject to intimidation and shutdown threats here in the United States or in Europe, Western Europe. And then we need to move that needle from the negative territory where it's been for the last 100 years, with the public not even knowing about this, through the neutral territory to the positive territory, to where the government institutions, the more formal governmental structures, which are supposed to be accountable all along to we the people, the true sovereigns of our world who create these governments in the first place, the big energy firms, embarrassed to the point where they can no longer pretend they have been doing their best and they have not been engaged in this type of activity I've mentioned, into the positive territory where then social support, economic support, the private sector all develops momentum, and we get this train rolling, because getting the train rolling in the breakthrough energy direction has been and remains so difficult. In China today, more than 80%, roughly 80% of the electricity comes from burning coal. More than 50% of the coal consumption on the planet is in China. Both India and China, in the period of the last 10 to 15 years, have been building coal-fired electricity plants in China and in India to beat the band. They need that to support their economic growth and so forth. Can you imagine what this is doing to global warming, greenhouse gases, cap and trade, all this concern? And the powers that be here in our country that are trying to convince us that solar panels, photovoltaics, wind turbines, biodiesel, and all this is going to solve the future, our scenarios are aware of this, are aware of the lockdown breakthrough energy technologies that would have let us run our vehicles strictly from water starting 40, 50 years ago. Miraculous, fuelless energy generators, solid state, some with moving parts, that could be placed inside electric vehicles and not require the vehicles to be recharged. Locked down under national security law, and we have whistleblower testimony and other testimony to corroborate this, of courtroom grade evidence that, if pursued, will prove conclusively the truth of what I'm relating here. Some of these technologies may have a legitimate reasoning to say, weapons potential, etc. However, what we have documented is that everything from heat-seeking shoulder-mounted missiles to hand grenades to knives to machine guns to ICBMs to nuclear missiles across the board and so forth, to plastic explosives, to the most dangerous technologies that Tesla invented, such as this death ray technology, which is in the hands of the black budget, secretized U.S. military structure with the HARP array up in Alaska, being used for God knows what purposes. Weather control, many speculate. The Tesla HARP array technologies are capable of controlling human emotions. This has been proved on a wide basis. We know there's a lot of underground military bases that have these advanced energy and transportation technologies not permitted into general circulation. We know that a whole major aspect of NASA has been using these technologies for a long time, and we the people are not allowed to even know about this. And the scenario we're marching toward right now is one where global poverty will remain problematic. In a global poverty scenario, you need things like GMO seeds or whatever to try to control global population, controlling food supplies, Terminator seeds. There's an agenda there that other people are talking about. how do you control population on a planet with 7 billion people, where people are concerned about that? And the issues of poverty, which are acute, which relate to child prostitution, which relate to underemployment of human talent, of human misery across the board, environmental destruction. What do you think is the principal cause of environmental harm in the developing nations, where the trees are all being cut down for fuel, where pollutants are being pushed into the rivers and lakes and streams and so forth? The people know this is not what they should be doing. It's because of poverty. So there's a direct relationship between poverty levels and environmental degradation. There's a direct relationship between poverty levels and birth control issues and people living in a substandard manner. The only humane, holistic solution to this, not just to global energy, and transportation, not just to environmental issues, but human poverty, human quality of life, is a holistic solution that involves getting the breakthrough energy and transportation technologies out into circulation. And so some percentage of that should have been out long ago. We, the people, informed about it and led to realize, to be capable to realize that this will improve the quality of life for everyone. The largest driver of our military policy for 20, 30 years in the United States has had to do with protecting global energy supplies and coveting global energy resources on the part of the grand masters at the high level of our world, who meet together in the Bilderberger and Committee of 300 and CFR type groups and others to strategize about all these things every year. They have understood that, the big threat is rocking the boat from their standpoint. And rocking the boat would amount to the improvements of our world that our world desperately needs to keep from running our world off the cliff. If you had much higher average quality of life for human beings across the board, especially women, education for women, quality of life for people in the developing nations, we have already proven in the case of the United States and in Europe and in Japan over the last 50 years that birth rates naturally drop. And the kind of tensions that lead to the perceived need for great militaries and warfare and so forth disappear. In a world where you have free energy technologies out and everybody starts to breathe easy and not be desperate, you have a world in which you no longer have the justification for major military expenditures and warfare, which flushes money down the toilet and harms societies at home that host these expenditures and abroad, where the incursions and the invasions and the occupations and the adventures are occurring. You see, all of these things are holistic. You cannot slice and dice and say, solar panel technology is going to cost multiples of the existing fossil fuels, which already are creating economic tensions around the world, which already cause the bus fares in Africa and in Latin America and the taxi fares to be too high, which are already causing China and India to have to resort to drastic measures to support their needs. But it'll make us feel better here in the United States, sort of like the upper middle class people who are concerned about the environment. Hello, you're not seeing the full picture. You're not smelling the coffee. You're not being real about forcing a more holistic and acceptable solution to come into being. So we need to get our government to support these things like the cold fusion LENR advances coming out of Andrea Rossi's group, the Blacklight Power type projects. All kinds of things that have been documented within our movement in Sterling Allen's materials, Breakthrough Energy Movement, New Energy Movement, Foster Gamble's projects that I'm getting underway, including my New Energy Declaration campaign, and so forth. We need this desperately. Just in the last few days, I read the 2013 report of the World Energy Council. It was almost a 500-page report, so I didn't read it verbatim, but I skimmed through it. This is a group that has inclusion from the highest levels of the energy sector today, from high-level government groups, networks, and networks involved in the suppression of the technologies in cases and in development and strategizing behind the scenes. Individuals invited in from academia, and the group has a bias towards trying to mainstream alternative energy technologies, but whether by design or lack of broader awareness is on this track of the existing limited portfolio of photovoltaics, wind turbines that cannot get humanity and Mother Earth, our world, to the better future we need for everyone, which is a future only possible under a shared abundance type scenario with higher qualities of human life and poverty alleviation across the board. You know, there are grave problems in these areas, and there are people working on child trafficking issues and child labor and environmental degradation in their own little silo, not recognizing, if they understood how important this breakthrough energy topic was, to rewrite the global energy and transportation sectors for the better. We would clean up so much corruption in our government, so much unnecessary expenditure on the part of humanity. Again, the tie-ins to the military sector, to burdensome taxation, all kinds of things, they would immediately be on board with us. But we have to start with groups like Greenpeace and Sierra Club and others, openness and accountability in government, and build a grand coalition in this area, because most people are not even aware of the breakthrough energy topic, and this needs to change. This 2013 World Energy Council 468-page report was indicating that last year, in 2013, on a global basis, on a BTU basis, that 85%, almost 85% of the world's energy consumption were fossil fuels. Last year, just last year, well over 80%, almost 85% of the total energy consumption of the planet is fossil fuels. And this group, over a period of the next 20 years, which is probably the most hopeful, knowledgeable, major project we can think of in the alternate energy sector, but tied closely to the conventional energy sector, they're saying that in 20 years, by 2035, they project that global fossil fuel consumption on a BTU basis will be 75%. Not 85%, 75%. It's going to drop, they're hoping, they're predicting, by 10% only in the next 20 years, almost a generation. Does that help you put into perspective how inadequate solar panel technology, photovoltaic technology, wind turbine, biofuels, and all the rest that's currently on the table is? Does that help you put into perspective how unacceptable it is? We're going to have 75% still of global energy consumption 20 years from now in fossil fuels, and nothing is being proposed for the transportation sector any better than go plug in your EV after you've gone 50 or 100 miles and you need to be plugged in, or go to the damn ExxonMobil, Texaco, BP Shell place, and now, you know, it's going to be a cute little machine, and it's smaller and it doesn't make any noise, and it's still going to be $5 a gallon to fill up your FCEV with hydrogen. And the big boys will still be with their cigars at the Bilderberger meeting every year, because everything in the transportation energy sector and in the grid power sector will be as John D. Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan set it up 100 years ago. This is where we're going, and this is what the current agenda, including the whole alternate energy sector, is about. And the global warming, carbon cap and trade, carbon footprints, and all this. That whole thing needs, that whole story needs to change by the new inconvenient truths, but really the great new exciting revelations to come forward of this fantastic untold story that humanity can now be brought into, with the great enthusiasm and hope that will engender on the part of not only everyone here in the United States, but globally. Everyone will be so energized by this story to recognize, wow, we can have free energy, free transportation. New lifestyles will become possible across the board. I mean, you can take 50 families that are your favorite, network of family and friend acquaintances, and you could go out to an underutilized parcel of land here in the United States or internationally and build a community from scratch with this type of technology. Agriculture anywhere becomes possible. Pumping of water, year-round greenhouses for growing organic crops, heating and air conditioning all free of charge, no grid power necessary. Transportation will all be possible with these revolutionary energy technologies where you can have your vehicles there and you can just motor off or fly off in your free energy technology type devices. This is a new world, this is a better world, but it is so different and it is so improved that the powers that be that have control major sectors of the global economy and tie into government groups and tie into the CIA groups that have been responsible for global security policy for decades behind the scenes and this sort of thing. These are not the type of groups that will embrace any revolutionary change, any dramatic change for the better in the status quo. It has to come from the grassroots level. It's always been the case. It's always been the case that societies tend to go toward latter-day Rome scenarios. Individuals and major groups prove incapable generation after generation of handling power and privilege responsibly. It leads by universal laws, cause and effect, what goes around comes around, however you want to phrase it, to train wrecks. And then it's up to society to reinvent. And it always comes from the grassroots level. And this is what we need at this time. So I'm going to conclude this video at this point. I would just ask, please do what you can via Facebook, via social networking, your voluntary efforts, offers of contribution to be involved in any of our movements and projects mentioned to help fortify them, help take them forward, and help us build a grand coalition from this that within the next several years can increasingly, a step at a time, eclipse this limited stage-managed story that is ultimately, if you understand it properly, a dead-end road for humanity and for Mother Earth, and bring forward the new story that is so exciting that once it gets out there, it's going to catch fire and it's just going to run. And then we can have a golden age of shared abundance for humanity, as opposed to some funky Orwellian water world Hunger Games types scenario, which is really what the current default course is leading toward. So please get involved and help. Thank you.